Did U.S. presidents play a key role in backing Russia into a corner that sparked the Ukraine war? We're going to go ahead and get into this. We're doing we're covering the Ukraine war today. My name is Tills4Thrills, Julian Tiller, whatever. And this is the Tills4Thrills podcast. Welcome. If you guys would like to see more content regarding any topics, or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can hit us up at any of these social media websites. We're on Rumble, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitch, we're on X. You can also email us directly at the Tills4Thrills podcast at gmail.com. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my co-host, Nick Straub, everyone.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Glad to have you back with us on this episode of the podcast. We're super excited to bring this content back to you guys. Hopefully you guys are as stoked as we are. We've been prepping for this for a long time. If you guys ever have anything that you want to talk to anybody about, if you guys are struggling with anything and you're a veteran in need, you can always call the Veterans Crisis Line. You can dial 988 and just press 1. It's as easy as that. Without further ado, I think we're going to go ahead and toss the football back to Julian. We'll go on ahead and introduce our guest for today.
Yeah, man. So I'm super excited. I have my dad on the podcast. His name is Adrian. And I think that this episode is going to be kind of unique in the fact that we're going to be stepping away from just the veterans and military stuff for the day. We'll dig a little bit deeper into that side of things later on in the episode, but to have a civilian's perspective on some of the maybe politics or some of the opinions that go into it is going to be interesting. So without further ado, welcome, Adrian.
Oh, my name's Adrian, and yes, I'm Julian's dad, and I'm very proud of the service that you've given to the country, and I'm grateful to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to talking about these topics that you want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We're super stoked to have you on. It's, like Julian had said, it's going to be really, really nice to have kind of a civilian's perspective on these kinds of matters. Because for us as veterans, we talk about it and we always kind of think in like, a uniform militaristic kind of way. So just kind of diving right on in, with the question that Julian had asked right at the opening of this week's episode, do you think that the last couple presidents that we've had have played a crucial role in kind of backing Russia into that corner that we see where they're kind of doing what they're doing with Ukraine?
Yeah, it goes back further than just the last couple of presidents. It goes all the way back to Clinton. Clinton came in. There was no Soviet Union. It was a Cold War. There was no reason to provoke any other countries, but they used NATO to actually change what they wanted to do and start admitting other nations into NATO that were former Soviet Union countries, Poland being one, I think Warsaw, and they just started there, and then George Bush also pushed to have different treaties wrote up. They wanted to say that these people are being persecuted, and so we have to protect them. And so I don't know. I think that it's just been a snowball of different things that have happened since the Clintons were in office, and the snowball has not stopped getting any bigger, and the war in Ukraine is a result of all that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not as well researched as I maybe want to be, but I know you had a couple of articles that you shared with us, and I was looking at it, and I'm like, man. So first and foremost, let's get into the beginnings of the current Ukrainian president and where he started making his bones, and figuring that out.
So, NATO has always been just trying to, they just want to have control over what's happening. They always want to have that control over what's going on. And so some of the things that they pushed against what some strategists suggested. Some strategists suggested that if you go in this direction, you're going to push Russia into a corner and they're going to not like it, and then you're going to have a situation. But on the other side of that coin, there's a lot of people out in the world that felt like, well, if we push Russia into this war, then they're going to have to use their resources and they're going to deplete their army and they're going to deplete their resources. And we have sanctions on them already, so it's going to hurt their economy. And, and those are kind of some of the things that on a world economic scale that people don't take into consideration, but those are motivating factors that NATO wanted to do this to Russia in order to hurt them economically.
Right. So far, we've kind of seen, like you said, that they've kind of pushed and pushed and pushed. The U.S. at least has kind of pushed and pushed and pushed on Russia. I'm just kind of curious. I just want to rack your brain a little bit. What are maybe some of the things that you think that we could have done differently to maybe not be in this position? Or do you think that this position that everybody's in has kind of always been inevitable?
Well, unfortunately, I think things were going pretty good before NATO started talking about letting all of these other countries into the UN because Russia was against letting them into the UN. That's kind of why they wanted to do it. Like they're like, well, Russia says they don't want you in the UN. Let's go make these people part of the UN. Some of them have come in and been relatively good partners, like Poland. Poland's a very good partner of the United States, and they're pretty much independent, and they're not warring against anybody. They're not helping Ukraine. Only thing they're helping Ukraine with is they're taking people in. So all these refugees that are coming out of Ukraine, Poland is taking them in and helping them out, which is a big deal. And those are the kind of things that I think NATO was supposed to be doing in the first place, but not manipulating other countries into going into war. And I think that that's what the result of this is that NATO ultimately has manipulated Russia into war, thinking that, well, if we do this, it's going to hurt Russia. We already have sanctions on them, so their economy is going to crack, and it would just push them further and further into a bad situation. Unfortunately, Biden gave them a pass and let them have the Nord Stream pipeline, and they were selling millions of dollars of oil to the EU, and so that gave Russia actually, a lot of money to fund this war. And so you look at different things about how it led up to this, and there was just a lot of missteps that actually pushed into doing all of this stuff.
Right. Before we get into it again, I just want to apologize. I was having some technical difficulties. I had to leave and come back and reset a bunch of stuff, and we're here now, so hopefully it works out. But going into it, I want to get your take on a couple of things. First, starting out with so if you look at it, Trump went on and he said something about $350 billion to the Ukraine, where that number's really kind of incorrect. He inflated that number. I did some research, and it was closer to I think it was like 183 billion off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at my stats again.
I'm looking it up right now for you.
Yeah. So what exactly are your thought processes on why he inflated those numbers and presented it to the media as if it were facts?
Well, I think that he is talking not only the monetary value of what we gave them in money, because we did give them a lot of money, but we've also given them a lot of monetary value in weaponry. We weren't even supposed to give them fighter jets, but we ended up, during the Biden administration, we ended up giving them fighter jets. And basically to Russia, that was a red line. That was like a red line that we weren't supposed to cross. Like there was some small rules of engagement, like you can give them hand weapons and you can give them ammunition and, let them go out and do their best. But once you start giving them, superior arms like jets and other things like that, it escalates everything. It escalates what's going on. And so, I think that he's looking at it from an overall perspective, like including the weapons, including the ammo, including everything. We've given them a lot. And what did we get for it? And that's basically, Trump's a businessman, so he's not going to leave anything on the table. He's not going to be like, well, and the cash part of it, we gave you X, Y, Z, so that's really all we're talking about here. No, he's going to talk about the totality of it.
So I get that. And I also understand that there are some classified informations being passed around within the White House, within the Pentagon, stuff like that, that the public doesn't have access to look up for statistics and whatnot. But let's break it down. So it's 182.8 billion in emergency funding from the United States, approximately 83. But part of that breakdown is 67.3 billion as part of the total aid package to the Ukraine, is broken down in 25 billions for weapons and munitions, 15 billion in armored vehicles and tanks, 15 billion in air defense, 5 billion in drones and aviation support. So, and then other logistics, 7.3 billion. So I think that was included in the stats for the 183 billion that was sent to the Ukraine. My question is, why didn't Biden take any steps to prevent, like why didn't he take any steps to end the war there? Because that's, they think that throwing money at a problem is a solution when in fact it might not be. And now Trump's like negotiating a deal, right? So not only are we throwing more taxpayer dollars at the situation during the Biden administration, but now Trump is like, hey, let's bring an end to the war in totally and completely. What does that look like?
Well, it has to start with a ceasefire, and basically the negotiations have to come from those two countries. They have to sit down and negotiate what that looks like. Nobody's gonna know what that looks like until Ukraine and Russia sit down and talk about it. And I'm sure that the State Department is working on that diligently. They're over there all the time trying to get one side or the other to come to the table and say, look, this is what we want, and we'll stop all of this. But nobody's going to get exactly what they want. That's why it's a negotiation. You have to negotiate to it, and you're going to have to compromise some way or another.
Right. So, it just goes into, hey, for a second, let's talk about the pull out of Afghanistan. We were willing to lose billions of dollars of equipment, and, I didn't see anybody go to jail or get locked up for that. Hey, look, if I lost my rifle in the field, they're going to be some serious consequences. But now the Taliban has all this stuff. So we're willing to do that in Afghanistan, but then it's like we're just going to throw a whole bunch more billions of dollars at the Ukraine problem during the Biden administration. And now Trump comes in and he's like, hey, man, we're willing to help you. Like, we're actively willing to help you with, at the possibility of sparking World War III. And, all we ask is you let us have some minerals for our research and development and everything. So what's your opinion on Trump's proposal? And what do you think would come of it? Because I know that Putin, he's skeptical about it, because he's like, okay, well, if we go into a ceasefire, and I want to preface this first and foremost for the audience, Putin bad, right? Putin bad. I don't like Russia. I don't agree with their politics. I don't really agree with a lot of the shit that they do. I don't even think this war should have started in the first place. Going back to he was backed into a corner, I'm not going to justify it because I don't like to see all the death, right? I don't think it's right. And I think that it's kind of crazy that, people on the other side of the politics are saying, at first they're like, oh no, save Ukraine. And now they're saying, oh no, let's win this war. And it's kind of back-ended, but, what do you think Putin, why do you think Putin is skeptical that Ukraine is just going to rebuild their army during the ceasefire and effectively ignore the ceasefire eventually and come back in and go back to war?
Well, that's always a possibility on both sides, that they're going to use the ceasefire to reevaluate and rebuild and get ready for another offensive. That's in any ceasefire. That's true for anybody, because that's kind of like what it allows you to do. Like, take a break. Yeah. But we're going to prepare for the next offensive. That's anyone that's involved in a ceasefire from a war. But the main goal is to quickly get everybody to the table, and get everybody to negotiate during that ceasefire. Because the longer you wait to get anybody to the table, the more chances that the other side is just going to re-up their arms and go right back to war. With that being said, all you can do is try as hard as you can to bring them to the table, and what that looks like is again, it's going to depend on what the negotiations are between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah. So let's get into the beginning of this, because I think it's really important for people to know. I don't think enough people know this. Mostly because I didn't even know it, right? And I fucking was in the shit. So what was Zelensky's profession prior to him being president of the Ukraine? And if you look it up, it's public knowledge for anybody. Before becoming president of the Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky was a comedian, actor, and television producer who gained fame as a star of a satirical TV show called The Servant of the People, where he ironically played a school teacher who unexpectedly becomes president of the Ukraine. Now, he goes from acting in a certain role, and now he's in it. What was that about, and how did that come up into play?
Well, it was just because the United States decided once again to get into nation building, and they wanted to have somebody in the administration in Ukraine that was going to be on their side and that wasn't going to be pro-Russian. Unfortunately, the previous president, which I have a hard time saying his name, but the Victor, whatever he was, the previous president was I just have a hard time with his last name. He was they called him pro-Russian, but he was trying to keep the peace between Russia and Ukraine. Unfortunately, anytime you separate a large group of people from a home country, you're going to have some people in your country that want to go back. They want to be back in that other country. Like, so there was a lot of Russian separatists that wanted Ukraine. I don't say a lot. I would say a handful. There was probably a handful of Russians that lived in Ukraine that wanted to be part of Russia again, or they maybe they had family. Maybe they felt like, they've been part of Russia. Maybe they're just traditionalists and they were like, we should be part of Russia. I mean, people have different ideas, but the problem, I think, was that once Ukraine tried to squash those separatists and say, we don't want to hear your propaganda. Well, what did that look like? I'm not sure. Maybe it could be considered racism. Maybe it could be considered ethnic cleansing. Who knows what that actually looked like? But those kind of things are what got Russia's attention. And then I think that when NATO and the EU and everybody else saw that, they just decided, well, if we can push Russia into conflict, then they're going to use their resources, and it's going to make Russia economy bad, and also we can say, well, Russia is doing these bad things because Russia bad, so now we can put sanctions on them, and we can hurt their economy, and we can do all these other things, and so that's just what happened. That is exactly what happened. And they wanted to have somebody in the government that they could control. And that's where you get Zelensky, because he was propped up by the United States, put in there, and basically they're so corrupt in Ukraine that it just basically became a money laundering operation for the next 10, 15 years.
So I do want to get into the corruption a little bit, because there's been allegations of corruption with no actual evidence that's been presented, as far as I've been able to research. But while Zelensky campaigned on fighting corruption, Ukraine still ranks high on global corruption indexes. So why is that? And in your words, what is the proof or evidence of the corruption, and how does that money laundering tie in?
Well, I don't have any paper proof. I don't have any documents here to prove any of the corruption that's going on in Russia or going on in Ukraine. But when you have an energy company that is, they're running the energy for all of Ukraine, and basically it's a giant conglomerate, because they're basically the only energy company in Ukraine. So then you get some people in the Ukrainian government that said, hey, you know what? We think there's a bunch of corruption that's going on at this energy company, and we need to investigate them. So they started an investigation. And at that same time that they're starting this investigation, lo and behold, Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is part of this board of Burisma. And he's getting paid large sums of money. Whether or not he knows how to run an energy company, I have no idea. But he was getting paid a lot of money to be on a board of an energy company in Ukraine. And when Biden came to see them and said, hey, if you don't call off this prosecutor, you're not getting your $1 billion that we promised you from the United States. So they called off the prosecutor, and they fired him, and no more investigation. And then there goes the $1 billion, right? So Is that proof of corruption? Maybe, maybe not, but it sure is it sure is a bunch of damning evidence that doesn't look good for Biden or the United States.
Right. So that ties into a whole bunch of different things because, legacy media is consistently targeting certain issues because they're getting funding from the government or they're getting funding from whoever decides to pay them. But I do want to go into, a lot of the right side of things, or right-wing media or, whatever will say, oh, he's a corrupt authoritarian because he paused elections so that he could stay in power. But it is, in fact, in the U.S. I mean, not the U.S. The Ukrainian Constitution, to pause those during martial law and wartime, right? So now you got to look at like, hey, man, back in 2016 to 2020, when President Trump was in office, everybody on the left was saying Trump bad, Trump evil, and he's going to declare martial law and he's going to pause elections and he's going to become a dictator and all this. Well, during the end, I when COVID hit, it really became that definite possibility where we had to declare martial law in some area, in some instances. And guess what? He didn't pause the election. He was like, no, go for it. Let's see who's going to get elected. And then he lost the 2020 election. And he still argues to this day, it was a fixed election. And I got to look at the stats on that and whatever, but came back in 2024 and was like, hey, yo, I'm back, baby. I'm back, baby. Here I am. And now you got to look at, well, why didn't Zelensky host the election? Why didn't he say, hey, big dog, go ahead, whatever. I get we're in wartime, but go ahead.
Well, I haven't read the Ukrainian Constitution, but some people argue that during wartime they're prohibited from having elections. Now, I don't know if that's true, how true that is or not. I don't know what the statute says in their Constitution, but if that's what it says, that's what it says. But it seems to me that it should be discretionary, and if they're able to, they should have their elections. Let the people have their voice, at least in some form or fashion. But also, whether you're talking about Russia or whether you're talking about Ukraine, within those two countries, I don't think the people want to be at war. The people don't want to go to war. I mean, I think most of their fighting army has been decimated, and they're just conscripting people. They're just getting people off the streets and saying, "Come on, you're going," and it's not good. It's not good. And those are kind of some of the things that maybe higher ups in government are privy to with classified briefings, where they get to see stuff that we don't know about. And I think that's part of the reason why Trump is like, there's just too many people dying. There's too many people dying, and we just gotta stop the killing.
Oh, for sure. And I'm looking at it. So give me 1 second. Let me look this up. I think it's Article 80. Yeah. So Article 83 states, and this is in regards to the Ukrainian Constitution, that during martial law, its powers extend until the next convocation is elected after martial law ends. I think it. So what I'm looking at is it prohibits presidential, parliamentary, and local elections while martial law is in effect. So while martial law is in effect, you can't hold an election. Okay. So that answers that question. But now here we go. As of January 31st, 2025, 12,605 civilian deaths happened. Ukrainian military casualties were estimated in January 2024 of 70,000 killed and 100,000 to 120,000 wounded. And that was just last year, like at the beginning of last year, you know?
Right.
So what does that look like now in 2025? Because that's a whole year after that. And yeah, they are grabbing, like I've seen the videos of them just grabbing people off the street, and that's not right, dude. That's dictatorship. That's authoritarian. That's, you know, kind of now you're taking the will of the people away. Obviously, these are obviously people who don't want to fight, who are just like, nah, man, I'm just trying to live my life. And you're forcing them into a situation that they're probably going to die now because they're untrained, they're unwilling, they're not really in it to win it. They're just like, I just want to live, and you're fucking throwing me out there.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for the politics of it? You know, what does that mean to the Ukrainian people, what their leadership is doing?
Well, I would argue that they don't want to. I mean, granted, you know, having just read the Article 83 of the Constitution for Ukraine, honestly, it feels like they're powerless. It sounds like they're powerless, and they, you know, can't really elect a new official because it is martial law. So now they're being, you know, able-bodied males being forced into that. It's almost like a draft without being a draft, you know, because they don't even get a chance to go to jail. They're just like, here, throw them up on the front lines and see what happens. You know?
Yeah.
So, Nick, do you have any? Actually, before we get to that, I'd actually like to hear the audience's thoughts on it. You guys can go ahead and comment down below. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Or you can email us at the Tills4Thrills@gmail.com and follow us on any other social media sites that we have. We're on every major social media platform. But now I do want to get Nick's perspective on this.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting because what I'm curious about is who's lying about the numbers. Because we can sit here and do the song and dance all day long, but we all know about the casualties and the wounded. We know someone's lying. Someone has to be lying, you know. So I'm curious to see what the actual numbers are, like the actual numbers, you know, because from stuff that I've seen online, you know, and you got to remember too, you know, this isn't necessarily World War II. This isn't necessarily Vietnam that we're talking about here. This entire war is on the internet, you know, and I can't preface that enough. This entire war is all over the internet, you know, from videos of dudes hand-to-hand combat, you know, lobbing grenades, trench warfare, all this stuff. So, and I've specifically, you know, personally seen a couple accounts on Reddit and stuff like that where, I mean, it's chaos, man. So when you had brought up the, you know, the 100,000 to 120,000, you know, estimated to be wounded, you know, I want to know, is that actually really the number? Because like we said, you know, if they're just pulling guys off of the streets and not really training them, kind of giving them like this half-ass bullshit training and just throwing them out and just, we'll see what happens, right? I'm curious to see what that actually looks like in terms of casualty numbers, in terms of wounded numbers, in terms of, you know, killed, and, you know, those kinds of things. So, you know, Adrian, I'm curious to see kind of what your take is on that.
Well, you talk about trench warfare, you know, in 2014, when the separatists in the Donbass region were fighting against Ukraine, there was already, you know, the Donbass region is a highly industrialized area there in Ukraine, and they were fighting because they were Russian separatists, and they were fighting against the Ukrainians. And so there was already 14,000 people killed during that time before this conflict escalated, and Russia and Germany stepped in, and they signed some accords, and I don't know what that really means. Maybe they were putting sanctions on somebody, but they kind of slowed the fighting down a little bit. But then, but because, again, when you have that kind of ceasefire and you let people regroup, that's when Russia brought in another 75,000 troops, and they put them in that Donbass region, and
Right.
that began that trench warfare that you're talking about, and then it just escalated from there.
Right. So I did some of the numbers research, and I did the numbers for Ukraine. So as far as Russia goes, BBC News have verified 100,000 Russian military deaths. But Congressional Research Service estimated it to be approximately 120,000 dead on the Russian side, and about 170 to 180,000 totaling around 300,000 casualties completely in the war. So you have hundreds of thousands of people being either killed or wounded during this conflict that really shouldn't have taken place in the first place. But this all started back in 2014. Adrian, if you could just kind of elaborate on the timeline that you have in front of you, I'd be really interested in hearing it.
Well, it's like what I was saying earlier. When you have a country that separates from a mother country, not everybody's going to be happy about that. And so you did have some Russian separatists, and they basically started the conflict in the Donbass region. And I think that at that time, basically the rest of NATO and all the other countries, they just put that onus on Russia and said, look, Russia bad, and we need to stop these people and whatever. And it kind of makes sense, because whenever you're trying to stop a conflict, everybody's on board. Everybody wants to stop the conflict. But nobody asks, why are we having this conflict? Because both people on both sides have voices. There's something to be said about people that were loyal to Russia, and they want to remain loyal to Russia. Maybe something should have been done about that, and maybe they should have said, well, go back to Russia. Just go back to Russia then. Live in Russia. Maybe that was a better idea than I don't know, writing people letters and telling them how angry you are that you're fighting. I mean, I know that's a cliche, but it seems like that's all that ever happens, So some of those things, when you have those people fighting, who knows what the real answer is, but everybody's on board to try to make it stop. And so, unfortunately, the steps that were taken to make it stop didn't make it stop. They just escalated it.
Right. So do you think that, part of the things that the Biden administration had done as far as the Russia-Ukraine situation, do you think that, for example, like stopping the pipeline, do you think that definitely played a big role into what we're seeing now?
Well, the Biden administration didn't stop the pipeline. The Biden administration actually agreed to let the pipeline go through. So that gave Russia more money, because they were selling their oil to Germany and other places in the EU. And so that gave them the money to go ahead and fund the war that they were in already. And so the Biden administration talked a lot of talk, but they didn't have any action. There was no action. So they really didn't stop anything. They just let it fester and continue. And then they started saying, well, we're going to, poor Ukraine, we're going to give them some money, and we're going to give them some more, and we're going to give them some more. And then they started saying, they started propagandizing, yeah, Russia bad, Ukraine good, we need to give them money, we need to help them and stop this invasion and all this kind of shit. But they really didn't do much to try to stop anything.
So going back to the end of Biden's presidency, you know, he authorized a whole bunch of United States missiles to be used in the conflict, almost sparking World War III, right? And to me, that's just a really, really crazy thing, you know, because again, instead of stopping the war, he was focused on pushing towards more war. And it's ridiculous. And for security purposes, for you know, the fact that it's confidential, undisclosed to the public and stuff like that, there's not an exact number of how many missiles were issued to Ukraine to use in the fight. And you know, I really would like to get into that mindset of you know, why did he think that was okay? Why did he, you know, and some would argue that he was just a puppet and he wasn't all there, and maybe, you know, getting older in his years, he couldn't really cognitively act on it. But why would he do something why would he put America in a position like that, you know?
Well, it's a good question, and you're absolutely right that I don't think that he was even in charge. I think they told him, "Hey, this is what we're going to do, and you're not going to do anything about it. You're just going to back us, and you're going to say what we tell you to say, and this is what you're going to say." And that's pretty much what he did. A lot of times when presidents get to the end of their presidency and they know that they're not going to be reelected again, it gives them a lot of freedom to do whatever they want to do, basically. So they say what they want to say and they do what they want to do because they know that they're not going to get reelected.
Right. And I mean, man, when you're a sitting president and you get a phone call after a debate that says, "Hey, dog, you ain't our primary anymore. We're going to switch to Kamala." Like, that's, ooh, man, that's rough.
That's some wild stuff.
How can you be a sitting president running for the presidency and then somebody says, "Nah, dog, you ain't it," and then you're just like, "Okay, I'm out of the race now." Like, what the fuck, you know?
Well, in my opinion, it's just my humble opinion that Joe Biden was never in charge. It was Condoleezza Rice and it was Obama from the basement. They were telling everybody what to do. I take it back. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say Condoleezza Rice. I meant to say Susan Rice. Condoleezza Rice was a good person and she was on the right side of things. I'm talking about Susan Rice and Barack Obama. They've been in control of things the whole time that Joe Biden's been in office, and he probably hasn't made one decision that he wasn't told to make by Obama. That's just my opinion.
Right. And you know what, for the audience, I'd like to hear your theories. If you know, just comment below, email us at the Tills4Thrills Podcast at gmail.com, whatever you want to do. But with that said, Nick, if you could look up the video that we can put on screen. There's a video where Barack Obama's doing an interview and he's like, you know, if I could, instead of being president again, because he said he didn't want to do that, he said, if I could be the guy in a bunker with an earpiece talking to the guy who's in charge, telling him what to say, I would much rather do that. Who's to say he didn't make that a reality, right? And then there's also another video that surfaced where Joe Biden was in presidency. I can't remember the exact year, but Barack Obama made an appearance at the White House, and while Joe Biden was trying to shake his hand and say, "Hey, welcome to the party," kind of thing, Obama was being swarmed by all of his fans, all of his constituents, whatever it may be. And he was completely blowing off Joe Biden, you know, who was the sitting president at the time. And so then it's like, who's really in charge? You know, like, what does that look like?
Well, there's a lot to be said for the cult of personality. You know, people love who they love, and everybody you know, I don't say everybody, but the left really, really loved Barack Obama. They love Barack Obama. He was a very charismatic speaker, and he was that. He was a very charismatic speaker, and he had a lot of people under his wing. He just wasn't. He wasn't my idea of a president. He wasn't my idea of a good president. He grew the government just like a good Democrat. He grew the government and took a lot of what do you call it? He made it sound like I'm creating all these jobs. I've created 11,000 jobs a month, but it was all government. He was just growing the government. And and I know that the government doesn't make money. They only take money. They don't make any money. They just take your money and my money. And so growing the government was not a good idea. And a lot of people on the right knew that. They fought against it. But it was, we weren't in charge. So it was very difficult. You have to remember that the Democrats have been in charge of the government for over 20 years in the past couple of decades.
Right. And, it also goes back to, the government's supposed to fear the people, not the people fear the government type thing. Right. And bigger government's not okay. Like, the government shouldn't have their hand in everyday, lives of individual people. But Nick actually found the quote from Barack Obama about the bunker thing. I'm going to go ahead and add it to the screen real fast. You can look at it right here. If I could make an arrangement where I had a stand-in, a front man or a front woman, and they had an earpiece in, and I was just in my basement in my sweats looking through stuff, then deliver the lines, but somebody else was doing all the talking, I'd be fine with that. That's like his exact quote. So
yeah,
who's
kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, seriously. It makes you wonder if he didn't make that a reality. So,
well, it only makes you wonder if you think that Biden was cognitive enough to run the country. But when you realize that he wasn't, then there's no more wondering about it.
Right. And so getting back into the Ukraine stuff, who was really running the show, and why was it being pushed to continue the war instead of let's figure out a deal to stop the war? And now you have the Trump administration coming in saying, hey man, we want to stop the death. We just want to stop the death. And now you got the left screaming at Donald Trump just because they can't agree with him on anything. Like, listen, dog, I'll tell you right now, I don't agree with some of the shit that he's done or doing now. I made that very apparent in my first video. I can criticize my own sitting president,
sure,
but he's a hell of a lot better option than, say, Kamala Harris or Joe Biden with their policies and their politics and everything. Like, I think it was Elon Musk who was in an interview with Joe Rogan, and he was saying the statistics for the asylum cities and stuff like that, and the numbers of people that were being placed there, like as far as illegal immigrants goes, they were trying to legalize these people. They were trying to nationalize them, these citizens, as U.S. citizens. And if that would have happened, democracy would have been dead. Like, the Republican parties would never have another chance. So, you have warmongering left who is obviously like, let's continue the war versus let's try to find a deal to bring peace. And it's hard to see, man. And it's hard to see so many people are like, oh, Felon 47 or, oh, the Little Orange Man. And it's like, come on, dude. Wait, like, at what point do you stop looking at facts and just argue for the sake of arguing?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of people out there that they're going to believe what they want to believe, and you're not going to change their mind. I mean, you can talk to people about facts. There's a difference between facts and beliefs. And beliefs are very hard things to change. Facts are facts. You can't change a fact. A fact is a fact, and there's no changing that. But it's hard even to get people to look at those facts and change their beliefs, because they just don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe that these things that somebody says, look at XYZ, look at these things that are happening, and people are just like, well, I never heard of that. I never saw that happen. So it's really difficult to change people's belief structure. But again, beliefs and facts are two different things.
Right. Fact and opinion. The problem with it, though, is too many people have been, I mean, let's just be honest, they've been brainwashed. That their opinion is fact, and it's crazy, and they get overly sensitive by it, and it's just a wild ride. But we are going to take a quick break here. I do want to get the audience's opinion on it, so go ahead and comment below, smash that like button, subscribe, everything. You can email us at the Tills4Thrills Podcast. Nick, you want to bring up that other banner real quick? You can follow us on every social media platform. We're on Rumble, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitch, we're on X. Just look up Tills4Thrills and we're there, man. So when we come back, we're also going to get the veteran perspective on it, and what it looked like for us while we were still in the military, prior to or during the initial conflict. So, Nick, do you have anything you want to say before we go on break?
Whoa, getting crazy. Yeah. It's super interesting, right? The things that we've talked about between the Trump administration, the Biden administration, and the differences between the two on how they've kind of handled this situation. Like Julian had said, guys, like, comment, subscribe, share it. Otherwise, I'm going to be underneath your bed tonight when you go to sleep. Other than that, I think we'll just go ahead and give our audience and us a little break, and then we'll catch you guys back after the break. Bye-bye. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome on back to the Tills4Thrills podcast. Hopefully that break wasn't super long for you guys, or if you just skipped ahead because you wanted to see our lovely faces again, that's fine too. Just remember, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, you guys can always go ahead and email us at the Tills4Thrills podcast at gmail.com. You guys want to show some love, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, share this everywhere that you can. We're on Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, X, right? We're on all the cool little things. And if you don't subscribe, like I said, I'm going to be underneath your bed when you go to sleep tonight, baby. So just to kind of get back into what we were getting at, and hinting at before we left, we said that we were going to kind of share some of the veteran side of things as far as getting crazy, knocking stuff over. Some of the veteran kind of things as in relation to the Russia Ukraine stuff. So Julian, I just had a quick question for you. What did that kind of look like, for you and your time of service? Because I know that you were kind of at more of like a ForceCom base, right?
Yeah. So I was at Fort Cavazos, previously named Fort Hood, where I got lucky. Okay, so I didn't actually, during the start of the war, they were forming up, basically getting ready to go out to Germany, go out to Europe, and like kind of do a show of force and support the efforts, the war efforts in Ukraine and stuff like that. And I got lucky because I was going to Korea. I was going to South Korea as a duty station. So what ended up happening though was a lot of people were super concerned in the army because it's like, that's not our war. Like I
Right.
joined to fight for the United States as opposed to fighting somebody else's war to save their country. And their perspective, and it falls in line with mine, is, that's across the globe, right? It's not like my next door neighbor's getting their doors knocked down. That's an EU problem. And I really think that they should be doing a lot more to fund that side of things, fight alongside it. And I really think that the United States playing big brother to the entire world needs to stop, because we really internally have to fix a lot of ourselves. So as a service member at the time, this was the thought process for a lot of military members. It's like, hey man, yeah, sure. Do we want death to stop? Absolutely. Do we think that this war is even something that should have happened? Absolutely not. But again, we have a lot of stuff that we need to fix before we get into it. And that's just my opinion, man.
Yeah, so kind of just to share my perspective a little bit. So I wasn't at a ForceCom installation. I was at a TRADOC installation, right? The big booze. So for us, it was just every normal day. There was no briefings going on. Nobody was really gearing up to go anywhere. I think the most excitement that we had was maybe a couple guys, shooting off to the Middle East to go do some things over there. But other than that, it really wasn't much of a change for us going on. What I'm curious is, for Adrian, I'm curious to see, when you had heard the news about all this going on, kind of what was your just general reaction? Kind of how did you feel about what was going on? Were you concerned that the U.S. was going to get involved in any kind of way? Where were you kind of at with that?
Well, I think the general consensus amongst my friends and myself were the fact that we knew that boots on the ground in Ukraine from the United States was not an option. It just wasn't an option, because that would have been the spark heard around the world. That would have been that would have been the turning point for World War III. And I know that sounds cliche. Me saying World War III. We're probably at World War VI by now, because everybody's been involved in all these different conflicts, and they could all be considered world wars. When other people, if you have If you have a country fighting with a neighboring country, and then you have a country that's across the ocean helping out that other country, well, that's kind of a world war. That's kind of what world war means.
Like World War effort kind of
Like the
thing.
World War effort.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what that means. Like, it doesn't mean their war. It's a world war because there's people on the other side of the world that are helping you. So I think that the optics is a big thing for the United States politicians. Optics is their big thing, right?
Sure.
So we all knew, as onlookers and critics of the war, we all knew that boots on the ground from the United States was not an option. It's just not an option.
Right. And
now were there secret forces sent in to do XYZ or to help whatever? Only classified documents would say that, and I don't know if that actually happened. But I don't think that from my point of view, boots on the ground was never an option. We were just concerned about how much help are we going to give the Ukrainians before the Russians say, "Hey, fuck you. We're not putting up with this anymore. We don't like what you're doing, and we're not putting up with this anymore." Right.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it goes down to they are, as far as we know, they're a nuclear superpower, and they can ICBM. They have a stock of ICBMs, and they got nuclear warheads and shit like that. So when you're really looking at it, it's like, again, going back to Biden. I know it was a big threat from Russia when Biden authorized military missiles to be used to target Russian cities when they launched those, and it was a very scary point in time.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to get into is a lot of people think, for whatever reason, that Trump is like a puppet for Russia, or they have this crazy idea that Trump kisses ass to Putin all the time. And what are your thoughts on it, Adrian?
Well, understandably, Russia is a superpower, and I think that coming from Donald Trump's point of view, he has relationships with everybody, because I think everybody at one point in time, everybody liked Donald Trump. Everybody did at one point in time. He was a millionaire and he was flashy and everybody liked him. This is all before he ran for president, of course, right?
Right.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that he understands people in positions of power, and he understands that, look, maybe if you just stroke his ego a little bit and tell him what a great guy he is, you can get anything you want out of him. It doesn't have to be war. You see what I mean? It doesn't have to turn into war. Like, just lie to the guy and tell him, hey, God, you look great up there on that horse with no shirt on. That was awesome.
Well, it almost looks like kind of what you were saying yesterday about, picking and choosing who you help, and realizing that it's all in the perspective of how you say things to people. Like, if you don't have a fucking dollar, God damn, excuse me.
Lord have mercy.
So it's like,
what happened there?
So like, you don't have a fucking dollar, man, versus, hey man, I'm really sorry, I have to ask you for $1.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that goes right back to an old song from David Bowie, "The Politics of Dancing," right? It's the politics of dancing, man. Everything is the politics of dancing. Like imagine you walk into a store and you already know what you want, and you go and you grab it off the shelf, but when you go up to the counter, there's 3 people waiting in line Do you go up to the front of the line and say, hey, man, I just want to pay for this. I'll see you later. Or do you get in the back of the line? Like, what do you do, right? What's the common sense thing to do? You get in the back of the line, right? Because there's an invisible contract with everybody that you meet. There's this invisible contract that, hey, if I'm going to, and it's the same for politicians. If I'm going to come out on the world stage with you and talk about this, you better not make me look bad. Because if you make me look bad, you're not going to get what you want. You know, I mean, come on. It's that simple. It really is that simple. So there's been a lot of people that have said, hey, if you want to get something out of this guy, just go talk nice to him and you'll probably get what you want. But when you stand up and say, oh, this guy is he's evil person and and if we let him have any more power, he's going to kill everybody and he's going to drop nukes on the rest of the world. I mean, look, do you really want to how about this example? Your girlfriend tells you every day that you come home from traveling that I know you cheated on me. I know you cheated on me. You just might as well admit it. I know you cheated on me. And you're like, no, I didn't cheat on you. But if you keep pushing the fucking issue, guess what? I might as well do it. You're already accusing me of it. So it's that kind of mentality that if you keep telling somebody how horrible they are when they're not doing anything, like literally, okay, if you think about it, before this war happened and before everything escalated into this conflict, what was Russia doing? Who were they killing? They weren't killing anybody, and they weren't doing anything except keeping to themselves in their own country. When the fall of the Soviet Union happened and all these other countries got their freedom, Russia didn't go after them and say, we want you back. Now, yes, a handful of separatists in Ukraine tried to do that, and that's where all this started. But that should have been dealt with right then and there in that region, not on this epic global scale that it's happening now, where everybody wants Ukraine to win, even though they can't win. And what's it going to cost? It's going to cost every life in Ukraine, really?
Yeah. Well, and let's get into the atrocity that was the White House when he was in there and JD Vance had to go off on him and talk to him about how disrespectful he was and everything. Like, what the heck, man? You come in and you're begging for money. Because seriously, it's like they think more money solves the problem when no, it's going to have to go into like deep negotiations and looking at logistics and stuff like that. Why do you think he came in so fired up like he was, thinking he was going to get anything out of Trump in the first place?
Again, this is my humble opinion, but in my opinion, it's because the Democrats ambushed Zelensky. They ambushed him and they said, we want to have a secret meeting with you before you go talk to Trump. They brought him in to have a secret meeting and they told him, don't let Trump push you around. You go in there and you tell Trump how it's going to be. That's what this is my opinion. It's just my opinion. I don't know the facts, but I know the fact is that they had a meeting with Zelensky before he went to see Trump. So you take 1 + 1 and it equals 2, right? So you take the fact that the leftists, the Democrats
I don't know, because Terrence Howard would argue that 1 it's 1 × 1 doesn't equal 1. I don't know. He's on some weird, crazy shit, man.
Yeah. Again, we could. That's a whole nother podcast, right? But you take for example the Democrats hate Trump and they'll do anything they can to sabotage him. So what did they do? They brought Zelensky in and they most likely told him, go in there, don't let him push you around, get what you want and get out of there. And he came in fired up, and because the Democrats told him to, and I'm sorry, but that wasn't the right thing to do. And again, it always goes back to the politics of dancing, right? You're going to get more flies with honey than you are with vinegar. So you have to understand that, again, Zelensky is a puppet. He does what he's told. And that's a perfect example of it. Because he came in, he met with the Democrats, and they said, you better go in there and stand your ground and don't let Trump push you around. And so he went in there trying to do that instead of humbling himself and saying, thank you so much for what you've done for our country, and thank you so much. And I want to publicly thank this president for everything he's done for us. And now I humbly ask you to continue to help us, right? That's all he had to do. Really, that's all he had to do.
Yeah, and I think it's different when you're, asking for $1 versus you're asking for $1 billion, and it's wild to see, because for me personally, if I was, say, like renting a room from you, and I have to sit here and understand that you're taking that risk of like if I was a stranger, obviously you're taking that risk of, do I know this person? Are they actually going to pay me the rent? Are they actually going to contribute to the household? Are they actually going to do X, Y, and Z? Now we have this going on in the Ukraine where they're not contributing to our economy whatsoever, and they're asking for money. And instead of coming in and being like, hey, I'm so sorry I got to ask this, but, shit's not really going so well over here. Can you assist us? They're coming in being like, hey, your predecessor assisted us. Why aren't you? What the fuck? And it's just, I don't know, man. Shit's just crazy.
So here's something to think about. In the scenario of helping people, and just in general, I don't care if it's a beggar or somebody who comes and knock on your door or whatever it is, right? And just in the generality of helping people, you can help people to an extent. Like, in other words, you can ask me for $1, or you can ask me for $20 or $100 or whatever it is, right? And I'm going to say, here you go. I hope this helps you, and I hope you get where you're going. But if you come back next week and the next week and the next week, and you're like, hey, can I get that 100 again? Can I get another 100? Can I get another 100? Unfortunately, what it is you take those people in, you help them out, and then they have to be on their way. Like, I'm helping you, but now you have to be on your way. It's not a one-time deal. I'm not a bank. I'm not here. I'm not living my life to give to you. I'm giving my life to give to my family. And you asked me for help, and I gave you help, but it's time for you to move on. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just common sense that, hey, look, I'm going to help you out, but after I help you out, you have to move along, and now you have to help yourself. Especially when you're talking about billions of dollars. You're talking about billions of dollars here. And on top of that, those billions of dollars don't belong to the government. They belong to you and me. Those are our dollars. We should have a say-so in where those dollars go.
Yeah.
And if the sentiment is that half the country doesn't want to give those dollars to those people, then, it's time for you to move on. It's just time for you to move on.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that part of it too is that everybody has seen America give and give and give and give and give and give and give for so long that maybe these other countries have kind of grown accustomed, like, well, if we have problems, the US will just help us out. Mm-hmm. Maybe if we're having issues over here or over here, well, the US gave Germany such and such $1 billion to fund.
You're absolutely right, Nick. You're
this
absolutely
and
right.
that, So I think a big part of it is, like I said, the world has seen us give and give and give, right? So when is it our time to start receiving some of this stuff back? You know, we've gave and gave and shown all this love.
And I would tell you, Nick, it's not even about receiving it back. It's not about receiving it back. It's just about not having to give it again. And the money that I would give to you, the money that you would ask me for again, I'm going to give it to my country because my country needs the help. Look at how far in debt we are. If you look at how far in debt we are, it's because we're giving out all this money to everyone. And why aren't we putting it back in our own country? And I think that right now, that is the hot topic. That is the thing that, hey, man, we've been giving and giving and giving for all these years. And I don't even care if you don't want to give me the money back. Fine. I don't give a fuck about the money. But I'm not going to give you any more money from now on. The money I make, I'm going to give it back to myself.
Right. Give it back to the people on the stuff that
Exactly.
we need here at home.
Exactly. And that's a great point that you bring up, because I didn't realize that you felt that way too. And understanding that is understanding that there's probably hundreds of thousands of people that feel that same way, that I'm tired of giving and giving and giving, and people just expect it.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some appreciation. Thank you very much. And you don't have to give me the money anymore.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, just as an example, you know, I obviously definitely 100% agree with you. You know, just as an example, you know, I'm from Michigan. I live in Michigan. We have some of the worst roads in the entire country. Obviously, there's other states where, you know, their roads are in a similar state and, you know, they have some money being allocated towards that. You know, for example, you know, we were promised for the last, I think, 2 terms for our governor that she was going to fix the roads. So if the roads are being fixed, you tell me why last summer I bent my whole rim on my Harley hitting a pothole the size of Japan. You know what I mean? Where's this money coming from? Where's it going? Because it sure ain't fixing the roads. It sure ain't going back into the community. You know, for example, you know, Flint is reopening a school that's been shut down and abandoned for probably close to 2 decades. You know what I mean? Like it's nice to see that the community is kind of pooling these resources together. But, you know, in the example of Flint has, to be frank, been a shithole for a long time. You know, now obviously we're kind of getting it back to where it kind of needs to be and stuff. But, you know, it goes into that whole, we've been giving and giving and giving. And right, like you said, you know, it would be nice to see some money come back, but that's not necessarily what we're worried about. What I'm worried about is I want to see this money go back into my community. I want to see outreach programs being started. I want to see homeless shelters. I want to see more food kitchens, right, being opened to accommodate or combat, you know, homelessness and veteran homelessness and things of that nature.
You know what's funny, Nick? So I just got done watching, I think it was last night, I was watching an episode of one of the podcasts I follow. They were talking about the Biden administration allocating, I think it was $43 billion to internet infrastructure, right? $43 billion. And they broke down. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Well, first and foremost, it came back. None of that infrastructure had been implemented. 0 people were connected, right? So where did that money go? Now, that money could have also, with like millions of dollars left over, housed every homeless veteran in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
With like, I think $350,000 homes kind of shit.
Yeah.
And it's wild to see that the money that we're paying in taxpayer dollars is just disappearing. We don't know where it's going. And I think people are insane. First and foremost, again, preface this by saying there's a lot of stuff that Doge and Trump are doing that I'm not for.
Yeah.
But when shit is exposed on a fraudulent level, or shit is exposed on a level that determines huge amounts of waste, it's like, why can't people get behind it? And why are people fighting it? And why are people arguing that, you know, and you look back at all the other, even Democratic presidents, you got presidential candidates too, like Hillary Clinton, Obama, Biden, and they all stated in their campaigns, hey man, we want to get rid of waste and fraud in the government, but instead created more so.
Right. No, I mean, it's definitely it's kind of a hard subject. Well, I don't want to say it's necessarily a hard subject. It's an interesting subject for sure, because on one hand you have the people that support Doge and Trump and his administration and what they're doing, and on the other hand you have people that are like, no, this is bad, they're dismantling all these things, and we need this. But then you look at the numbers. Like, have you looked at the numbers of the amount of money that they've been like reallocating, and like that they've found that has just been going into like BS, like overseas bullshit? It's staggering, dude. And like you said, just with the internet infrastructure thing, I'm gonna call it the internet infrastructure thing, right? You could have took every homeless veteran on the street and not necessarily just housed them. You could have put these assholes in mansions. You know what I mean? Just as an example, so like we said, where is the money going? Because it's not coming back to us. I mean, obviously, we'll see, right? We'll find out,
Yeah.
but it's definitely going to be interesting to find out and see where all this stuff is coming and coming from, first off, and going to, second off. That's what I'm curious about.
Right. And I'd actually like to hear Adrian's perspective on it.
Well, there is a lot of money that's going outside of the United States, which is the hardest part to take. Like, there's the hardest part to take is all this frivolous money that goes outside of the United States for XYZ. I'm not going to get into all the specifics about Sesame Street in Iraq and all kinds of shit like that, but if you just take a step back and say, again, the government does not make money. They don't make money. All they do is take money from you and me, and then they allocate it for whatever, right? So why is all of this wasteful spending? Why is it even an issue? Why is it even an issue? Like, if you had a credit card and your family's using this one credit card, and your son is out there, I don't know, paying for a house for his girlfriend with your credit card, I mean, why aren't you going to step in and say, hey, son, we can't afford to buy her a house?
Yeah. You're saying kind of, how did we get here in the first place?
Right. Like, how did we get here in the first place, right? Like, again, the government doesn't make money. It only uses money from other people. It only takes the money in from everyone else and puts it to where it needs to go. Now, we can go all the way back to the Bush administration, where we can say, why are you using my tax dollars to make what do you call it? Why are you making these data centers that are collecting my data so that you can filter through my data to see if I'm against the government or not? Why are you doing that? Why are my tax dollars going to that? How come I don't have a choice in saying where those tax dollars go?
Sure.
Right? I mean, that was the big deal during Bush. Like, we all of us were up in arms, like, our privacy is at stake here. Now we're talking about way more than just privacy. And again, it goes back to exactly your question. How did we get here?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a quick question for the audience. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. Do you guys kind of agree with that line of thinking? Do you disagree? Let us know down below. You can email us at the Tills4Thrills Podcast at gmail.com. You can follow us on all this stuff. You can go ahead and get at us, man. We're on Rumble, we're on Instagram, we're on X, we're on, Facebook, all this stuff. Go ahead, let us know.
Yeah, I do have a a quick question for my pop over there. What was your initial thoughts when Trump introduced the Doge program, and what were some of your thoughts before it was introduced regarding, where's my money going?
Yeah, that's another good question. And I'll tell you, it started back in 2008 when Barack Obama got elected president. Because, again, I'll go back to all the jobs he created were government jobs. And when I used to listen to Mark Levin, he was a radio host at the time. Now he's on Fox News. I don't listen to him that much anymore because he's on Fox News. I would have rather him stayed independent and talked his talk. But the things he used to call the government a leviathan, and it was true, because we've never seen a government this big in our lifetimes. Government was always representatives that were getting paid very little money, and all they had to do was make sure that the schools were good, the roads were good, the railroad kept running, the airplanes are flying safely. I mean, these are things that we tax our people so that the government can take care of. However, then during the Obama era, it became there's water spill off on your land that comes from rain. Well, guess what? Now that's a waterway, and that belongs to the government, and you can't have anything to do with that water. And so I don't know if you remember the Bureau of Land Management having a conflict with those people I think it was up in Montana. I'm not sure exactly where it was, but they were trying to take their land away from them because water spillage from rain was on their land, and they considered it a waterway. So now it wasn't your land anymore. Now it's public land, or it's government controlled land, and we're going to take that land from you and you can't use it. So what happened was a lot of people got up in arms, and those people actually came out with guns, and they forced the government to leave their property, and they took their property back. Well, it wasn't long after that the guy was arrested, and he got sent to prison, and he had to fight to get out, and he finally got out of prison. But he had to fight. He had to fight the government for his own land.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Because of this bureaucracy, And so at that point, everybody in the rest of the country is going, what's going on? What the hell is going on with our government? And those are the kind of things that having a government that's so big and so out of control, that's what you get. That's kind of what you get. So you look at the ATF, it's the same thing with the ATF. They were going around arresting people for having gun parts because they considered those things illegal, but the Congress never said they were illegal. The Congress never made a law that said that thing was illegal. Those bureaucracies made those things illegal, and those bureaucracies are the things that we're fighting right now. And that's why, if you remember, when Trump came into office the first time in 2016, he wrote an executive order that said every bureaucratic agency across the board, for every new law for every new rule that you write, you've got to get rid of 2 laws or 2 rules. And so he basically opened the floodgates for less regulation and more freedom to build your company, more freedom to live your life.
Right.
And that was a beautiful thing. But it became crisis politics for the Democrats, and all they want to do is say he's going to poison the water, and he's going to push grandma off the ledge, and Medicaid is going to go away, and Social Security is going to die, and everybody's going to suffer. And so you have to say At what point do I not have to pay the government so much effing money just to live my life like I want to live my life?
No, for sure. I'm looking at it now, and it's funny because, Jon Stewart, the weekly show.
Yeah, very weak.
He did an interview with Ezra Klein, who actually broke down some of the processes for states to go through and implement regulation or implement, whether it be infrastructure or whether it be proposals for different bills on laws or whatever it may be. And it was like a 14-step process. And he's just like, Jon Stewart's freaking out the whole time. It's almost like he was red pilled. It was on I saw it on Louder with Crowder on Rumble.
It's crazy what happens when you bring common sense back into the picture, right?
Right. So I mean, he's just sitting there listening to this guy go step by step through the process, and every new step that's added, Jon Stewart's just like, "What? Are you serious?" And it's like, he's like, "Why are these people doing that?" And this is all Democratic policies.
Yeah, you're right. And again, it goes back to we have a Department of Agriculture, we have a Department of Education, we have a Department of Energy. There's probably a Department of Cultural Diversity. I mean, there's all these departments, but where's the Department of Common Sense?
Right. Shit, non-existent, dog.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, we are going to go ahead and start wrapping up. That I appreciate you being on here and talking with us. It's nice to get a unique perspective because, obviously a lot of the stuff that Nick and I, have to rely on is information that we got while we were in service or from a veteran's mindset. And it's nice to see somebody well read into the situation and the conflicts that's going on. With that said, do you have anything in closing but before we start wrapping up?
Well, I just think that, our government really needs to go back to doing the will of the people. And when Trump got elected by a majority of the people in this country, that's the mandate that the government has now. That's the mandate that was given to the government. Hey, these are the things that we want to see happen. And we elected this guy because he promised these things.
Right.
And if you follow what he promised, get us out of these wars, get us out of paying all of these countries tariffs. Look, the rest of the world, they charge us tremendous tariffs to get our goods. As a matter of fact, that's why it's very difficult for you to get a Tahoe in England because they don't allow it. The tariffs are too high. People can't afford it.
Right.
So that doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, I talked to a guy in Australia and I asked him about his lights. They make these really nice LED lights for trucks. And I was like, do you make anything to fit my truck? And he's like, well, what kind of truck do you have? And I sent him a picture of it and he goes, oh yeah, we don't have any kind of trucks like that in our country.
He said, no, dog.
You got nice trucks in your country. And I'm like, well, that's because the tariffs don't allow them to purchase them because they're too high.
Right.
Okay, so it makes sense that you would flatten that out across the board and say, look, if you're going to charge my country these tariffs to send you my goods, well, guess what? I'm going to charge you the same thing. I'm going to charge you the same thing to send your goods to my country. Like, it makes sense. It's common sense. Let's get back to the common sense way of doing things. And it is going to be painful for a little while. People are going to have to figure out where to go and how to make more money or do whatever. And it may be an adjustment for a little while, but things are going to start turning around very quickly in this country. And I think it's going to be a good thing. Unfortunately, on the Ukraine side of this subject that we're talking about today, too many people are putting all their eggs in the basket of Ukraine has to win. And that is not a really good foreseeable future. I really think that Ukraine needs to cut their losses. They need to make a negotiation, stop the killing, stop the dying. Let's rebuild your country, and let's move forward. Let's move forward with a more peaceful world, with a more peaceful process. You know, it doesn't have to be this way.
Right. No, you're absolutely 100% correct. I, again, shouldn't have even started in the first place, but, you know, yes, definitely stop the Ukraine has to win, because all that's going to do is bring more death. All that's going to do is bring more war. All that's going to do is just bring more fucking division within the world. And I think that that's like a huge thing that we've been pushed towards for the past 20 years, is just being divided. You know, it's like, when do we stop that division, come together to like make something real happen, make something good happen?
And it goes back to what you were saying earlier. You want to help your neighbor? Yeah, help your neighbor. But if your neighbor can't win the frickin' fight, then pull him out of there. Pull him out of there and get him to safety. Like, literally, you grab him by what do you call those little handles on the back of your
Yeah.
What do you call those handles on the back of your backpack or the back of your uniform?
Just
you
grab it.
that fucking handle, and pull him fucking out of that fucking situation and get him to safety.
Yeah.
And then you figure out what you're going to do from there, right? Get him the fuck out of there. That's what we need to do, Ukraine. We need to get him. That's what Trump's trying to do. Get him the fuck out of this war, and then we'll figure out how to get your country back.
Fuck, man, that's a fucking mouthful.
Yeah, and there was a lot of cuss words too. I didn't mean to. There's going to be a lot of bleeping in this video, I guess. But
no. So we run our podcast raw.
Yep.
You know, it is what it is. It is how it is. And if people don't like it, man, you know what? Fuck them.
I just feel like if anybody supports Ukraine, that's what you should do. You should go grab your buddy by the back of their backpack and drag them the hell out of there, and then get them to safety, and then we can figure this thing out.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think Europe needs to step up and start defending its own shit. You know, that's really the bottom line. Europe needs to step up, defend their shit, and really get themselves involved with it if they want to save Ukraine, right?
Yeah, but it's you know, you're talking about. I guess you're talking about instead of you going in there and grabbing your battle buddy by the back of the collar and dragging him out, now you're asking your girlfriend to do it.
Well, not necessarily, because last I checked, Ukraine is in Europe. It's a part of it, right?
No, I know.
That's like saying,
that's what I'm saying is Europe is America's girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, now you're asking your girlfriend to do it, so you better hope she can.
Yeah,
because she wants to be equal, right? She wants to be equal to you.
She better be built like a fucking tank, dog.
Yep.
That's what I'm talking about.
Built like a shit brick house.
So, all right, man. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We're going to end it here. But, you know, I do want to get the audience's comments, questions, concerns, Tills4Thrills Podcast at gmail.com. You can also comment on the video. You can give us a like. You can share it. You can follow us on all the social media platforms here that are listed. We appreciate you viewing. If you stayed for this long, we really appreciate it. You don't understand how much it helps us. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Nick for closing statements.
Yeah, guys, absolutely. You know, we were super excited to bring you guys this episode this week. Just want to reiterate, as always, if you're a veteran and you're going through some things and you need to talk to somebody, go ahead and dial the Veterans Crisis Line, dial 988 and then press 1. Again, that's 988 and then go ahead and press 1. Other than that, I think that we'll go ahead and catch you in the next episode, baby. Bye-bye.